Hey, it's Yuri and welcome back to this second video where we're talking about the 6 fat triggers in the Metabolism Masterclass. Hope you enjoyed video 1 where we talked about the reality of the metabolism myths and the things that are holding you back and from an information perspective. Today we're going to look at physiologically what are the things happening inside of you as a result of external influences. And I'll make sense of all this in a second. But remember, you're here because you want to lose weight, you want to keep it off, and you've tried to do everything to the best of your ability, but yet nothing has worked. Nothing has worked in terms of lasting results. And as I mentioned in video number 1, if you've exercised and you've eaten well, and you still can't lose the weight, what's happening is something internally, physiologically, is not right. Whether you want to call that, your metabolism, your hormones, your physiology, it's kind of part and parcel of the same thing. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 6 fat triggers, the 6 big reasons why all of that stuff gets messed up in the first place. Because once you uncover what these are, you can start to kind of peel the layers off the onion and kind of do the opposite of what I'm about to tell you. Remember, in the next video, I'm going to walk you through the 4-step reset, which is going to give you the 4-step plan to resetting your metabolism and helping you stay lean and healthy for good. Cool? All right, so let's jump in. So let's talk, let's have another fun fill in the blank session, shall we? The number one, or I shouldn't say the number one of the fat triggers is foods that create, or eating foods that create inflammation. This is really important to understand, and this is something that is the foundation, as I talked about in video number 1, the foundation of weight gain is that your body feels threatened, right? Like if you're a child and you feel scared, what do? You grab onto your blankie, right? Well, the same thing with our body. Our body is hardwired. If it's threatened, it's going to hold onto a blankie, which is essentially its fat. Because fat provides more energy than both carbohydrates and both carbohydrates and protein combined. So fat will yield 9 calories per gram. Both carbohydrates and protein give you 4 calories per gram. So it makes sense to hold on to these energy-dense fat stores if we feel threatened. So when we're eating foods that cause inflammation, remember, that is a form of stress on the body. So let's look at a couple examples. Gluten and dairy, 2 big ones. So milk, yogurt, cheese, breads, pasta, cereals from wheat, barley, and rye for the most part, okay? And the reason they're problematic is because they contain proteins like gliadin or casein in the case of dairy that irritate the gut lining and can seep into the bloodstream, and they eventually roam around in our blood as UFOs. Unidentified flying objects, pretty much, okay? So these are proteins that our body doesn't recognize at first, and as a result, it will mount an inflammatory and immune response against those proteins, okay? Because remember, when you eat something, it's technically not inside your body until it's absorbed out of the digestive tract into the bloodstream. That's when it's inside the body. However, a lot of foods create inflammatory responses because our body's like, whoa, what is that? Shouldn't be in here, it's too big, or we don't know what that is, or this is causing issues. Inflammation is a way of protecting ourselves. But remember, when we create inflammation, we also create high cortisol to protect ourselves against that inflammation. So it becomes this vicious cycle of cortisol, inflammation, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And as we talked about in video number 1, if we have too much cortisol all the time, we're going to be storing belly fat. So we need to cool the inflammation. And it starts off by reducing our consumption of those inflammatory foods, okay? Number 2 is, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, has nothing to do with food, but it's sitting and too much exercise. Oh yeah, I just said that, too much exercise. So let's talk about sitting. Sitting is an epidemic. It's the new smoking. There's a lot of research coming out of Vanderbilt University showing that sitting 8 hours a day reduces your life expectancy by several years. And if you're sitting 8 hours a day, going to the gym for half an hour at night is not going to counteract the detrimental health effects that sitting has. So I'm going to walk you through physiologically a really simple analogy to help you understand why sitting is not the greatest thing for us. So actually, I'll give you one more bonus cool thing. So there's an enzyme called LPL, lipoprotein lipase, that is actually upregulated when we stand. And when we sit, it's downregulated, which means that we don't burn as much fat when we sit, just because of that one enzyme. Pretty cool. Anyways, when I'm standing right here, my heart is right now, let's say 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters off the floor. So it has to work a lot harder to bring blood from my feet up to my head, right? That's covering almost 2 meters distance. So if I were sitting, that distance is maybe half, let's just as an example. So now my heart has to work half as hard to pump blood from my feet to my head. Now you might think that's a good thing, but remember, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you don't stress your heart and your muscles and your bones appropriately, they will turn to mush, more or less. That's why when you go to space, not that we go to outer space, but if we were going to outer space like the astronauts do, we would lose our bone mineral density and our muscle strength and mass within the space of a couple days, just because there's no resistance from gravity to work against. So it's the same thing when you're standing, your body, just your heart has to work harder to bring blood up, which is great. Plus you're standing, your muscles are toned, they have to pump the veins to bring the blood up, so that's a very good thing. So sitting is something we definitely want to avoid. If you're sitting, most likely watching this, get up every 20 minutes, just move around. At the very minimum, just get up out of your chair every 20 minutes and just like shake it out. Okay, just doing that will make a difference. On the flip side, too much exercise. Too much exercise is like driving your car 1,000,000 miles. What do you think will happen? Eventually the car will fall apart. The doors are going to fall off, the wheels are going to it's just not a good thing. Try to sell a car that's driven 1,000,000 miles. It's not going to happen. How about professional athletes? How many professional athletes get sold for big money when they're 40 years old? Like 0 of them. And that's because too much exercise over years and decades of training and games just wears the body down. Why does this happen? Well, it comes back to inflammation. When you exercise, remember this, exercise is a form of stress, but some stress is good, too much is bad, right? So there's it's kind of like a bell curve here where we have too little and too much. We want to be right in the middle here, okay? Because if we do too little, we're not going to get any kind of benefit. If we do too much, our body's going to break down. So we want to make sure that our exercise is kind of the effective dose, not too much, not too little. And if we do too much of it, we're going to create too much oxidative damage. So free radical damage, which are created by when we produce a lot of energy and we move our body. The byproduct of living, breathing, and producing energy are free radicals and oxidative stress. Too much of that over time wears the body down, increases inflammation, and remember that whole inflammation cortisol cycle? And there we go again, okay? So too much, not a good thing. How much do we want to get? Well, I'll talk to you about that in the next video. Okay, number 3, toxins are a big fat trigger. Toxins from the air, water, foods, okay? These are, I don't know if they're taken as seriously as they should. And the reason I say that is because these toxins will massively upset your hormonal balance. We're getting toxins in our water supply that are like xenoestrogens. And these xenoestrogens are like fake estrogens. And what that does is it's going to increase the estrogenic load in your body. And when you have too much estrogen in your body, good luck losing weight and feeling your best. Okay? Not a good thing. The same on the flip side, if you're going through menopause and your estrogen drops, well, you're going to have a tough time losing weight as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that if you guys have any questions about that in one of the upcoming videos. Toxins, let's go to the cellular level. When our cells are being bombarded by toxins, whether they're xenoestrogens or PCBs or pesticides, herbicides, perfumes from cosmetics, stuff like that, remember, these are all threats to the body that if over time our body reaches a toxic load or a toxic threshold, then our body is going to respond symptomatically. So let me show you this visually. So we have a bucket. Each one of our cells in our body has a bucket. And this, again, this is metaphorically speaking, okay? So we've got a bucket, and inside this bucket, over time, over the course of our life, we are exposed to, let's say, even coming out of the womb, we're exposed to toxins in the breast milk. But let's say we're fed soy formula and we eat McDonald's when we're growing up, and then we're living in a big city. Those toxins build up, and over time, they build up. But still, nothing's happening symptomatically. We're still fine. Nothing's going wrong. However, at some point in our lives, for me, it was when I was 17, I lost my hair to an autoimmune condition because my body reached its toxic threshold. For you, it might be when you're 40 or 55, or I don't know. So the body reaches a threshold, and above and beyond this point, we get this spillover. And that's when we start to exhibit symptoms. And it becomes a lot tougher for us, for instance, to lose weight, or our immune system goes haywire, or something happens. And for everyone, it's a little bit different. But just understand that toxins are a really important piece in this puzzle, because we want to get rid of these toxins or minimize them as much as we can, because if we don't, then we're constantly filling up our buckets with toxins. It's like filling up a bucket of water and constantly having that faucet, shooting water into the bucket. It's a very, very tough game to win. So remember, when we have too much toxicity in the body, we create inflammation as a protective mechanism. Cortisol is released to protect us against inflammation, and it doesn't happen, okay? In terms of losing weight. Number 4, deadly belly bugs. So this is not, I'm not talking about like bed bugs here. I'm talking about like bad bacteria in your gut. There's a lot of reasons for this, but I'm going to give you one reason. All living organisms produce waste. Okay, so we do, our little cells do, all the bacteria do. The bad bacteria, one of their waste products is called LPS, lipopolysaccharides. And these lipopolysaccharides have been scientifically shown to not only increase the size of your fat cells, but actually increase the number of them. And that's a very, very scary thought. As if we're not dealing with enough already, now we have bad bacteria that is spewing stuff into our bloodstream, these toxins, okay, that are duplicating the number of fat cells we have. And that's a very problematic thing, because now that if we have more fat cells, we essentially have more storage lockers for our body to store fat in. And that's going to make losing fat that much tougher. So we could talk about this quite extensively, but I'll just leave it at that for now. The gut, very important for weight loss. Number 5, sugar overload. This is probably one you already know about. It's not rocket science that if we eat a lot of sugar, we're going to increase our blood sugar, and that's going to increase insulin, and then too much insulin is going to increase cortisol, and then that's going to lead to a whole host of things. But remember, if we have too much blood sugar, too much insulin, that insulin is going to take all that sugar and store it as fat. Insulin is a storage hormone. So when you're eating too much sugar, you are essentially saying, hey, store me, store me, store me. So getting over the sugar addiction, if you suffer from cravings, which a lot of you guys do, I know this for a fact because I've surveyed you, I've spoken with you, sugar cravings are a big thing. The best way to get rid of sugar cravings is to get rid of the sugar. It's like an alcoholic. If you want to get off the alcohol, you can't have a little bit every now and then. Although with sugar, it's maybe a little more lenient because it's just naturally in some foods, like fruit, for instance, which is totally good. But we want to minimize things like refined sugar, white bread, cereals, pastas, pastries, pretty much anything you see in the display case at Starbucks, you want to avoid. That's as a rule of thumb. And even for that matter, most of the drinks at Starbucks are just loaded with sugar, especially if you're drinking anything more than herbal tea or a black coffee, which hopefully is decaf, then you're going to be pouring in like the frappuccinos, pumps and vanilla flavors and all that stuff. Not a good thing. Okay, the more sugar you eat, the fatter you will get. It's a very, very strong correlation. It's literally cause and effect. It's been shown in kids with fruit juices, all the way up to adults with all aspects of their diet. Okay, number 6 is too much Franken Food. And no, this is not a German type of food. This is Frankenstein-like food, which essentially means we're eating too much food that food companies are making and putting in front of us, telling us that they're the most convenient way to eat. So we have essentially traded our health for convenience. Yes, it's easier to throw a microwave dinner into the microwave and it takes 2 minutes than making a meal, which might take 20. But I don't know about you, it's really important to kind of eat well, right, as we've seen here. So we want to really reduce our reliance on these Franken foods. And this could be things from chips to pretty much any food you see advertised. As a rule of thumb, if it's advertised on TV, magazines, and so forth, you should probably avoid it because it's coming from companies like Post and Graham Crackers and Kellogg's, who now have massive conglomerates around the world to get their food into your stomach. And these companies scientifically engineer their foods to light up the reward system, the reward center in your brain. So they specifically engineer them with sugar, fat, and salt, and this has been proven that in a way that we crave those foods. For instance, like Pringles, have one. I think the saying is like, have just one and you can't stop, or once you pop, you can't stop. That's a terrible slogan. It's true, but it's conniving when you think about it, right? You have one of those Pringles that has been engineered to make you want more, and obviously that slogan makes sense. So these foods, the trouble with them is that they start to really disrupt, more so than just your hunger, they start to disrupt your hormones. So they're going to increase your blood sugar because a lot of them are refined. They're going to increase your insulin levels as a result. They're also going to mess up with your thyroid because, as we talked, we didn't talk about this. We talked about gluten. Gluten creates inflammation, but the other thing with gluten is that it actually has a very similar protein structure as your thyroid. So over time, your immune system can confuse gluten and your thyroid tissue and actually attack your thyroid, leading to Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So when we're eating foods that are made by man, processed foods, a lot of them contain gluten or glutinous substances, which only exacerbates this problem of inflammation and thyroid suppression, all that stuff. The other thing is that they're going to directly disrupt leptin communication with your brain. Leptin, as I mentioned, is that hormone that tells your brain I'm full. But these foods, if they contain, for instance, aspartame or MSG, two compounds, again, proven to sever that communication, because what they do is they create inflammation at the cellular level in your hypothalamus, which is the air traffic control for your body. It regulates everything, okay? But now this inflammation caused by these Franken foods are disrupting the normal processing of your hypothalamus, and your very important leptin hormone, which says I'm full, doesn't get that message to the hypothalamus, and you just continue to eat because you don't think you're full. And they've done studies in rats. Unfortunately, they have to go to the rodents for this stuff, where they've completely severed this type of communication, and rats will eat themselves to death until they have that communication back in place with leptin. It's crazy. So these are 6 big fat triggers, and the thing you have to understand is that these things, it's not about calories in, calories out. It's not about exercising more and eating less, because even if you do, and I'm sure you have, these are the things that are disrupting your physiology. They are ruining your metabolism by disrupting your normal hormonal balance. And when that happens, you can exercise until the end of time, even though you shouldn't, as we talked about here, and you can eat as healthy, and you can count calories all day long. It's not going to happen, okay? It's just not going to happen. So how do we fix this problem? How do we remedy this situation? How do we reset your metabolism to lose up to 5 pounds per week, as in some of the case studies I illustrated for you in the previous video? Well, that's what I'm going to show you how to do in the next video coming your way in just a few short days. I'm going to walk you through a 4-step reset, which is a 4-step plan to reset your metabolism. And I'm also going to show you a number of case studies from other men and women just like you who have struggled for years with their weight, and finally, following this simple and sound advice, have shed the weight and kept it off. It's awesome. So thank you once again for joining me in this second video of our Metabolism Masterclass. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you in our next video.